Steph is going to introduce our program today.
Good morning. So I'm not only going to introduce the program, since I think actually a lot of you have probably heard it. This was originally developed for third graders, which is about my speed for birding. So I'm very much looking forward to this. So I'm just going to concentrate on the bios for these wonderful speakers we have today. Reid is one of our original docents and was also the first docent administrator. He grew up in Arizona, where his first job was as the Phoenix Zoo photographer. He's also a gold and silversmith, a watercolorist and writer, and has taught science and mathematics. And I found out today he's also apparently a fruit carver, which is actually really cool. Reid and his wife Karen have lived in Carmel Valley for the last 41 years. Chuck worked as a state parks ranger for 35 years, almost 31 of them at Point Lobos. His wife Cheryl developed the bird and rumsen programs for local third graders, and in the early days helped to present them with Chuck and Reid in the classroom. Chuck is a photographer, especially of birds, and loves to forage and cook wild mushrooms. He has degrees in forest technology and environmental studies. The third speaker we actually have today is a little bit of a surprise guest. Stan has been Reid's classroom bird program cohort for the last 2 years, when Chuck was no longer able to do it. He is an avid birder, a writer, and of course a happy former docent administrator. So today we welcome these three wonderful master storytellers, and they're going to tell us all about birds.
Hey, glad you could make it. One qualification. When we're doing the program for the third graders, there's some shtick that we use that we're not going to use with you. And one of them was eating peanut butter, but I'm not going to tell you what that
It was eating peanut butter out of a diaper, and we thought we'd spare you that. It was talking about a California gull in a landfill and what they were kind of looking for. So we're not going to have you through that.
Some things are longer than we usually do, some things are a lot shorter than what we do, but I think you'll get the general idea.
You know, we're really happy to have Cheryl with us, and there was no write-up on Stan Dryden, which he actually doesn't need one because of all the work he's done with all of you, but he is certainly one of the primary bird people that I go to for answers, and I hope you do too. And he is graciously, I thought he'd lend us credibility. Which we're sometimes sadly in need of. So what we're really happy to have is Cheryl here, and we're, the three of us I think are wearing, beautiful. 4 of us are wearing bird bands. You know, we did this for the third grade for, well, it's been 24 years now, and we ended up banding the class at the end and talking about bird bands and migration and how useful that is. And so we send them all out, we sent them all out with bird bands, and Cheryl has found these, a sentimental treasure chest that she has, and these were ones that we first used, and I think
1991.
My wife Karen sewed these out of the stretchy fabric, so this is
and each class had a different color.
Yes.
And there were some kids that wore them the entire school year. Didn't take them off, which was, you know, wow, we had an impact.
Okay. Can you hear me back there? Hi, everyone. I see familiar faces and some new faces for me. But I actually was a docent for 7 years, many moons ago. I guess some of it must have been 24 years ago.
Yes.
Do we have birders in the group? It's become such a popular hobby. It's just amazing, isn't it? Okay, so when I was little, I was raised in a big scouting family and camping family. So if you grew up in a scouting and a camping family, if you see flashlight and a pillowcase, what kind of a hunt do you think of? Yay! Well, we lost our wonderful Bill and Ginger Francis retired back to their homeland of the Shenandoah Valley. But I had religiously gone out with them every month for over a year. And one thing that I learned from Bill, which is really helps you in puzzling out who your quarry is, shh.
Yes. It's good for this crowd.
It's good for this crowd. Shh. Shape, habit, and habitat. So if you see the shape of a bird, and you notice its habit, whatever the heck it's doing, and its habitat, it really helps you figure out the whole puzzlement. I know lots of people are cheating with their little gizmos these days. And one thing that I don't know if it's widely known anymore, but it's a big no-no in birding etiquette to be playing bird calls out in the wild this time of year. Anybody wrap that up in an easy, can we figure out why that is? Yeah.
You confuse the mating birds, they think there's a competitor.
They think there's a competitor, because we all know birds sing because they're happy, right?
They want to be happy.
They want to be happy.
Yeah.
So this, I slipped real quickly into my spiel here. At one point I was a whale. In the winter of 1984, I noticed that at the house that we lived in then at the park, the fence was about yay tall. It was about as tall as the one around the propane tank outside now, which is fairly new. Reid said about this little fence around the propane tank that it looked like where the Wicked Witch put the children. Just hold them in there for safekeeping. Our fence was about this tall, and I had migrated here from Pasadena, but I had gained about half again my body weight and wasn't getting around so well. I was. And I noticed that there were these voyeurs outside the corner of my fence. Maybe once a month, maybe once a week. They were wearing green jackets, and they had binoculars, and they were very intent and intense. And one of them, every once in a while, would leave me a little list of the species that they saw around our yard. And this is actually, if you've heard of a fellow named Grinnell, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but this is actually based on his what do you call it?
Census. No?
His
Nature
nature notes, right? So anyway, it's like passing on a little virus, you know? It's contagious, you know? And I realized I had this resource out there where I could go, I saw this thing and it sounded like, and it went like, and you know, with all this mysticism and witchcraft, this person could tell me exactly what it was that I saw. And I was hooked, but devastated to hear that they were going to be moving on. So, at any rate, one thing that gave me pause was when I was leaving the yard one day, the ringleader of this band of voyeurs came up to me and sweetly asked if the docents got to vote on the naming of the baby. I didn't even know her name. I was horrified. But anyway, I was hooked. And many years later, I don't want to take up all the time this morning, I could go on and on forever, but I realized that birds are in every continent, and kids are excellent observers. There's a wonderful 5th grade teacher at the River School, Marianne George, who Chuck would do programs for, and the kids would send a drawing back to Ranger Chuck. And I realized you could tell exactly where they were sitting at the lagoon and exactly what species they'd seen, you know? And I realized also doing public walks that simple things is breaking down the simple things and those wondrous things and sharing them with other people. You know, that people think that birds are kind of like people and they go back to their nest every night and maybe who knows how they do what they do. But what an excellent thing to found a program on, an introductory to natural history on, because birds are everywhere and kids are everywhere. You could be birding in the Safeway parking lot, you know. So basically how I devised the program was, and for you folks who've been through interpreters classes, and I hope you guys get to do this, one thing that also was helpful was Project Wild. It was a program for the rangers that was put on at one point, and they had lots of games, nature games, and that's a great way to harness energy and also reinforce concepts. So I hope that you guys get to do training like that. I'm sorry I don't know more of how things are these days. But you can tell my mind is bouncing around. So what I did was I drew a circle with my topic, birds, right? And I made 5 spokes. And this is how you would do a walk. Usually I learned from Jim Carpenter also, who was an interpreter extraordinaire, ranger that we used to have for a while. No more than 5 things or 5 stops, you know, whether you're doing a program or a nature walk. Sort of figure it out. And that old KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And one thing that I caught from Sister Anna, I was walking in the rain with her and a new docent by the name of Joanne, and Sister Anna had wowed us with the cruciferous vegetables with the little cruciforms in the flowers. That's the mustard. And the sun cups that are along the side of the trail, so close to the trail that in order to survive and be able to reproduce, their ovaries are actually under the ground. And when Joanne said, how do we not know this? So amazing and so wonderful. How do we not know this? And Sister Anna said, but this is why it's our responsibility to pass it on and pass it on. We've only known this fairly recently. We need to pass it on, but pass it on with wonder. So, good old eccentric Ginger Francis came up that first spring and brought something for the baby, which I think was maybe a peace offering. I wasn't quite sure. And come to find out, many years later, she shared with me that if it had been a girl, she would have wanted me to name the baby, for the baby to be named Phoebe, because that's her favorite bird. And wouldn't you know it, she had 3 boys. So you may do this. You may do this. She explained to me that this was what her people from the Shenandoah Valley, you better just open it, Chuck, and not get too showy. You're going to have to eat it now. Okay, it's getting near what holiday? You've got to open it all the way now. It was a piece of muslin. Is anybody familiar with this type of dyeing for spring holiday, Easter eggs, Passover? You take the onion skin and you boil your egg in it. Now, Sunset Magazine has also done this. They use nylon stockings and put in pretty little leaves. At any rate, these things are charming and contagious. So I was thinking that Ginger also treated me to the ballad of Alice Alga and Freddie Fungus. You all know that. First was a little bit, I don't know that it was bawdy, but maybe it was a little bit naughtier. The ones that I found online now aren't nearly as charming. But let's see, I remember Sister Anna with brushes are round, sedges have edges, and grasses have nodes all the way to the
These are
ground.
hard boiled, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're edible. We had one for breakfast. Oh, and
Beginning.
one of the greatest things, John Davis, some relation to a Norma Davis. Has anyone heard of a Norma Davis? Wrote a wonderful book with Alan Baldridge. We have it in our docent library. It's called The Bird Year. And this will make it sensible and bring it right into your heart. How they do what they do, why they do what they do. Highly recommended. Highly, highly recommended. So, field guide, I also love the Birder's Handbook. And it was very interesting the other day. I hadn't been out birding with a group in years. And everyone's gotten so technical. It's just a different experience. But it's still nice to have extra eyes and ears. So I want to thank many of you for allowing me to coach some of your shtick. One of the things that I also fell in love with was the fact that Uncle Wayne Kelly would have his grandkids commit, and Phyllis, commit a poem to memory every vacation that they come stay. And you can do that. Find someone who will, it's good. I swear. Anybody want an egg? No. Okay, it's good. Sorry, I don't have any salt. Got salt in the car if you want it. What a mess. Okay, so Wayne pulled up in his little hot rod with convertible with his grandson with dark hair, and he had these wonderful poems by a local Newbery Award-winning author that is a local fellow, or was a local fellow, Paul Fleischman.
PG.
In Pacific Grove, he lived, or lives, yeah. Joyful Noise was this one. So Chuck and I are going to read this, but this also wound up feeding into what became the bird program. So, boy, it's dark in here. Okay. No. Sorry. Can you see?
I can tell who's that.
Book lice.
I was born in a fine old edition of Schiller.
Well, I started life in a private eye thriller.
We're book lice who dwell
in these dusty
bookshelves. Later, I lodged in Scott's Works, Volume 50.
While I passed my youth in an Agatha Christie.
We're book lice attached despite contrasting pasts. One day, while in search of a new place to eat,
She fell down 7 shelves where we happened to meet.
we're book lice
Who chew on the bookbinding glue.
We honeymooned in an old guidebook on Greece.
I miss Conan Doyle. She pined for her Keats.
We're book lice, find mates despite different tastes. So we set up our home inside Roget's Thesaurus.
Not far from my mysteries, close to her Horace.
We're book lice, adoring, despite his loud snoring. And there we resided, and there will remain.
She near her Shakespeare, I near my Spillane.
We're book-loving book lice,
Plain proof of the fact
which I'm certain I read in a book some months back, that opposites often are known to attract.
And part of that introduction is that there's many ways to study birds. And one of them, of course, is through poetry. And
what happens to bird calls?
bird calls, let me get my And like Cheryl said, there's some
It's okay. Just put it asleep.
technical things. When we come into a big classroom like this, we like to say, put your hand up if you know the bird.
Don't blurt it out.
Yes, and we give them some calls. Yes, indeed.
Blue.
Yes.
Oh, yes, of course.
And of course, you know, we have to make it a little easy in the beginning for the people who are just starting in this very addictive thing. How about this one?
Wasn't that a corgi?
How about that one? This is one that actually we have. Yes, flicker. No. This is a belted. Thank you. And let's see. We'll just do one more here. This is. How about this one? That sounds like a dog. What this says, is grokking is a great blue heron.
You should have said grokking earlier.
Now, there's other ways that we can study this through poetry, and of course we're in a perfect group for that because there's a lot of poets here.
Yes.
Stan, we'll get us all working on this, I think.
Now this is a good one. You choose one. We're going to read the poem, but we're not going to say the bird's name. And then when you recognize who's described in there, raise your hand.
This is called the
Yeah, we don't give it away. You got to work
guess
with
what
this.
the ant is, okay? The ant is a ferocious fowl. She pecks you until she makes you howl. And all the time, she flaps her wings and says the most insulting things. And when you try to take her eggs, she bites large pieces from your legs. No hands yet.
Here's one. There's two.
Rodney.
Chicken.
Okay?
Yeah, but
Okay.
That was the chicken.
I think you need to finish it.
Finish it. Okay, finish it. The only safe way to get these is to creep up on your hands and knees. In the meantime, a friend must hide and jump out on the other side. And when you snatch the eggs and run, she pursues the other one.
Yes.
The difficulty is to find a trusty friend who will not mind.
Good.
He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. Ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his molten walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls.
No hands. Oh, one over there.
Two. Close. Bigger.
Bigger.
Yes. Bigger.
Bigger.
Not big enough. Bald eagle.
Yes.
That was Tennyson, by the way.
Alfred Lord. Okay.
The ant eats between his meals, and that's the reason why he very, very rarely feels as well as you and I. His eye is dull, his head is bald, his neck is growing thinner. Oh, what a lesson for us all, to only eat at dinner. These same hands going up. So, yes. Did you? Yes. Most of these, if you were in your third grade self, when you hear the head is bald, you'd go, oh, bald eagle. But you got it. Thank you.
You got the vulture.
Yes, indeed. So, once again, this man in Pacific Grove did a series of not only the book-like poems,
Stumbly one.
it's a little like the Three Stooges, you guys. If we can we can raise the bar that far, that's what we need. How about you and I do this one? You want to come up to this and we'll both kind of feed into it?
Okay, who starts?
You know, let's go to this one. We're just going to do one. It should be the next one on
Part of the glove. Yeah, these hands.
I know. There.
Well,
That's it. Okay. You want to begin or you want me to?
you start. You're on that side.
You can be left or right.
I'm left. I
Right.
seem.
Seam, a shrike.
I ape.
Ape, the gull.
I sing just like.
Sing just like the cardinal. I
Mimic.
mimic.
Coots.
I
Mirror.
mirror.
Crows.
I
Imitate.
imitate.
The Orioles. I copy.
Copy. Rim.
I echo.
Echo. Owls.
I know by heart.
I know by heart the catbird's calls.
But all of that
Is simply
sham
jam for the mockingbird.
is what I am. So we do that.
So the
And
idea
it's
here is that you can work in a really nice little group, and you don't have to practice, because whatever you're going to do is going to come out informational and humorous.
So, for many of you, and many, you probably know this, but there are 4 things that make a bird absolutely unique. 4 things that make a bird unique. And actually, Judd, may we have you, you know what, I'd like Judd to come up here and sit. And Chuck, let's put this over on this side. Here, Stan, that's good. Yeah,
Oh, Judd's going to sit here.
Judd's going to sit here.
Okay.
4 things that make a bird unique. And you know, it's kind of amazing when you discover these things and think of everything from the hummingbird to the condor has these 4 things.
And here are your clues right here.
Yes?
Call.
You know, I didn't give them any, any clues, and I know some of these people will go right for it. You want to give us some clues?
I'll do this. Oh,
Okay.
Wait for it and don't blurt it out.
Hands up, please. Hands up, please, if you know.
Something you must remember, we're the entertainers and the educators, and the parents and the teacher, the disciplinarians. And if we have to have you leave the room,
Correct.
with you, they're going to be really upset. So don't blurt it out.
Thank you. In advance. You may not want to speak to me after this. All right, what do we have that first one? Oh, there. Ah. Hands up, please. Yes. We're going to turn Judd into a bird for you. I think that's the right kind of message, Judd. This is a festive get-together. Next.
Now the next one is pronounced differently than it's spelled. Oh.
You want me to, here, why don't you handle that? Here.
I heard flirting. Art. It's spelled crop, but it's pronounced crop.
Well, I think it's probably pronounced both, come to think of it. But have you ever heard those people in the South that say, you know, that kind of politics just sticks in my craw?
Our bird here is wearing a craw.
Yeah. Could you hand me the hamburger too? So, craw, located right underneath this skin in the throat area. And for you, that's it. Judd, I thought you might want this is kind of like a hamburger ham sandwich in this craw too. I'm gonna put that in there.
Getting in my craw.
I am sticking in your craw. Sorry. There we go. Okay.
Can you pick up his rocks?
Yeah, there's a few rocks in there in the sandwich.
Little rocks, little rocks.
It's Arkansas.
Oh, that's so easy.
Gizzard.
Was that a blur?
Now you're going to have to put, I think, your hand, let's have this hand out. And we'll put that one in the other hand. Yeah, there you go. And then you turn that on. Now if you can just kind of hold that up. It's what you don't want out of the turkey at Thanksgiving. You know, this gizzard is something that is a very muscular pouch inside of the stomach of the bird. It's part of the stomach, and it grinds, and it grinds, and it moves, and that's why Chuck was talking about bits of gravel. Many birds eat little bits of gravel. If you keep a bird, many times you feed them some of that, so that gets down in this craw and helps break the seeds down and the other things that they eat. But even, you know, your turkey vultures, big bird, has a gizzard. And let's go to the last thing.
All alone.
They just don't get it. I think you may have to send one of them out.
Tom, are you here? Tom Clifton? Your dad is acting up.
See, that's a good one for him.
You see the struts? It's not just hollow. It's not like a noodle.
True.
It's cross members.
Struts.
Yeah.
You know, inside those birds' bones, and many of them are about the thickness of a credit card, but in areas that are stressed, they have, if you can show them that, these little struts that grow within the bone, and they act like strengtheners for those bones, so that they don't crunch or you know, get crushed easily. I know you like that gizzard, huh? Yes, I think we ought to do that. And it is in, yep, there and there. Oh, there it is. I feel like it's time for me to swing the ladder around and knock somebody over. Yeah, that kind of thing.
This is such a unique, appropriate part of a bird that it has to have a poem of its own. A lizard has no gizzard, and a camel has no bill, and you'll never see a shark soar like a turkey vulture will.
Bare bones don't have struts inside, and wallabies don't have wings. And you'll never see a kangaroo that twitters, squawks, or sings.
A cheetah doesn't ever have a feather or a crop, and a giraffe can't fly 500 miles without a single stop.
An octopus has no air sacs. A squid never did have down. And you'll rarely see an earthworm that is any color but dull brown.
But birds have feathers, wings, and crops, and a gizzard and a beak, with dazzling colors and awesome flight. They really are unique.
Just like this man. Thank you. Well, you know, we collect things.
Okay. So,
In places you may not want to visit, actually.
well, being a book lice, And having read Agatha Christie and Mickey Spillane and all that, back in the 60s I was introduced to Tolkien and science fiction. And I read all of the classics by Asimov and Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke and in all my readings, it was determined that birds came, okay, if you go toward the sun and then turn left and go toward Alpha Centauri and then go another 10,000 light years, there's a planet there where birds all immigrated and came here. And they were already well developed and established in what niches they were going to fill. And
they ate mushrooms.
And
Yeah.
yes.
We don't have Spike with us today.
Oh, we don't?
No, we don't. And
What are you going to do then?
well, we're going to talk about how how birds came about.
Yeah, but I just told you.
No, the real way birds came about.
But it's on the internet. I read it.
The interesting thing, I was lucky enough to hear a man named Paul Sereno, who's, Ed would know that name. He's kind of the rock star of the paleontology people. And he came to Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History and gave this amazing lecture on feathered dinosaurs. And it's really hard to imagine, but the feathers came far before flight. And feathers, actually, Paul said at the time, they were digging out a Tyrannosaurus rex in a place in Wyoming, and it had been preserved in 3D, kind of. It wasn't flat, where the bones were all pressed together, and he said, we're pretty confident that when we get this guy uncovered, we're going to see feathers on him. And what happened is, this group of dinosaurs, which were raptors, what Paul said, and I love that analogy, he said the size, most birds came, I was doing this watercolor last night, most birds came from something called a coelurosaur, right here. And these guys were a little dinosaur about this size. He said 2 feet, 1 to 2 feet is perfect for these animals. They started developing feathers on their arms. We don't know why. You have your own beliefs. This is Cynornyx over here. There was a lady in Pacific Grove that had 5 skeletons of the Cynornyx. Most of our modern birds, they believe, have been descended from Cynornyx over here. Feathers came. Some couldn't use them to fly. But you know what it did for them? It gave them the most spectacular appearances. And the theropods, the ones that ate insects, like this little coelurosaur, you know, at that time there were dragonflies that were about 1 foot long. There were smaller ones too. But he started developing feathers, don't know why, and they developed on his arms and on his back and became insulation for them, but they also gave them the most spectacular appearances. And this one, they believe, his arms with those feathers began to grow longer and longer. And his arms started to stretch out so that he could grab these things much easier, his prey. And in time, they developed into wings. Those longer arms with the feathers. What Paul Sereno said is when you're this size and you have feathers and you begin to flap your arms around, you may be able to start lifting yourself up. And so, 2 things. Feathers. The loon apparently is descended from that one. Eventually we got something that looked like this. This is something, this is called Archaeopteryx. And if you can see him well, and I wanted to make this big enough for you to see him, he's our intermediary between some of the birds and the dinosaurs. And there are some things about him that I want you to notice. One, on his wings, what does he have? Claws. Claws. They figured that they would drag themselves up on trees with these claws and climb and tend to glide and fly better. The other thing he has in his, what would normally be a bill, is what? Can you see them? Teeth. Real teeth. And the last thing that is kind of one of the easy things is he's got this long tail which is full of bones. Much like our little dinosaur that I showed you. Bony tail. All the way to the end, little vertebrae, all the way along it. In time, we believe that changed, and you get what you have here. Yeah, as an example, beak, no teeth, feathered tail, a little tailbone at the end, but a tail made of feathers, and no claws up here anymore. They don't need them anymore. So, I just wanted to tell you, that the history of birds is fascinating to me, and the whole evolutionary thing. But this is the current thinking about where birds came from now. These little, most of them, these 2-foot, 1 to 2 foot coelurosaurs that spread out and became Cynornyx and became these ones larger and larger. So for those of you who love dinosaurs, and I'm one of those, and actually I am a dinosaur in this technology, they're still with us. They're still with us.
Right there. So let's start that year.
Bird year.
This, right now.
Thank you, Judd. If you want to stay there, you can. If you like us to turn you into something else. Thank you for, we'll let you.
I'm moving on.
I think that's a wise choice. One thing about birds, as he goes into this bird call thing, is, there's no other creature. Are you looking for perhaps a romantic liaison? I'm trying to make an important point here. You can go back to that in a minute.
It's that time of the year.
I know it is. What makes birds so amazing is that they really have, in a sense, control of 3 different things. The air, they work with the ocean, they work with the land, and they work with the atmosphere. Nothing else can claim that, and it leads to this tremendous variety of things like albatross that spend almost all their time over the ocean, to everything else that we have here. Land, sky, and water. It's an amazing whole for these species of birds. Go for it.
So at certain times of the year, you know that food is going to be plentiful. The temperature is going to be really nice. Species are coming through, the spring migration, the fall migration. But spring migration is wonderful. You're going to start seeing the males in full plumage. The better the colors, the better the song, the better the behavior, the easier it is to attract a female. I've been having some difficulty here. So, we've been watching hummingbirds lately, and they have some unique sounds of their own, but they'll do tail flaring to intimidate and threaten another bird. Other birds will chase another one up in the air, and there'll be this almost ballet of battle. Never really touching, but trying to get that other bird out of its territory. And then you'll see, like we saw last year with the house finch, the male was going through the posturings and the songs, and the female was just ignoring him. But he kept going on and on and on and on. And, you know, my display should let you know.
Well,
that
excuse me, but some male birds grow a whole new group of feathers for the
I
season.
wore one of my good LL Beans.
And they come over and go, hi. These are Kruger ants. He's singing to you, but these are Kruger ants. And I just wanted to so we compete over this young, beautiful yeah, well, you know what? Let's go get a cup of coffee.
That's a single malt.
You know, honestly, this time now of year, and we tell the kids this, if you get up in the morning early, you are going to hear more bird song right now than you will hear all year long, and you will hear the most marvelous things. And what Stan was telling me, you know, these little birds like towhees that are always down in the bushes, this time of year they're going to be up on top of this 40-foot pine tree going, "Oh, Solomeo!" singing. And it's amazing what happens during this time. So I really want to encourage you in the early morning when you get up and make your coffee and stumble maybe outside, sit there and listen, because you are going to hear these miraculous, wonderful things from robins to everything that you can imagine that's living in your area. And one of the accounts that I read, in some places of the world, you know, we're talking about the whole world, there are no trees. And these birds who need to attract a mate, what do? They fly and they sing while they fly.
So, who have we got here? Acorns. Normally we would go through a whole series of these species talking about shape, habit, and habitat. And we decided to go a different way, and I wanted to show a bunch of my own pictures. And we're going to talk about and tell little stories about some of the birds that we really like.
Yes.
Over the last 2 years, I've been just completely enthralled with the acorn woodpecker. From studies that have been done out at Hastings Reservation,
Yes.
the woodpeckers live in a community group. There can be 4 to 8 birds. So you've got, in essence, a mom and a pop, but you've got cousins or brothers and sisters. And it's kind of funny because they will all take part in the mating. They will all take part in stashing acorns in granaries to develop the larvae and the other insects they feed on. They gather in groups, they'll take group baths, and there's even group mating. And there's a couple of pictures of those coming up. That one, yeah. They find different places to build their cavities, whether it be a power pole or a pine tree or in the cottonwood tree they're using as their granary. We had a beautiful little olive tree next to our place, and we had the 4 birds coming down, working on the hole and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And You know, sometimes the ant will kick the breeders' eggs out of the nest and put her own in there. Sometimes they eat the other's nests, but they're all there to help out once the chicks start to appear, and they will all be bringing food back to the kids in the nest. So here we are in this olive tree. There's a couple of pictures. 10 minutes?
That's not just for you,
No,
Joe.
wait.
That's for all of us.
Okay. But amazing. Well, to cut the acorn woodpecker story short, we had gone out to an appointment that morning, and we came back to find that the groundskeepers had cut the tree down. I know, and it was in the spring, nesting. And so Cheryl looked it up online and got the Fish and Game regulations about doing that kind of stuff in nesting season. We took it over to the manager, Hacienda, and we said, don't do this again. But the funny guy that, you know, we walked up to him and I said, there were birds nesting in that tree. And he goes, not anymore. Oh, that was the mating group, and here they are in the olive tree. You can see the whole cavity up here at the top. But there were 4 to 6 birds constantly working that back and forth and back and forth. So,
You know, I need to tell them at Hastings what they told us about these birds, too. At Hastings Reservation, and some of you have been out there, they have microphones that they have attached to the trees all around Hastings. They know every woodpecker, acorn woodpecker that they have by his voice or her voice. And they keep track of them. And they told us a story that 4 miles away, where they were also keeping track of acorn woodpeckers, one of the older males died and left a space for a younger male to come. They said, woodpeckers talk all the time about everything. Within one day, one of the ones at Hastings left, flew over to this spot that was like 4 miles away and took over that place. Now, it filled me with wonder that that could be communicated by these birds that are talking all the time. And it made me think, what else are they talking about? Looking at my window? Tell you that we are surrounded by acorn woodpeckers. There's usually a granary tree that these woodpeckers use communally in this group. And the ones around my house have decided that my shake roof is their granary. And they have hidden all these acorns. You know, when it's acorn time, these birds kind of get this crazy thing comes over them. And I was thinking it's kind of like that dog treat that maybe you saw on TV. It's really obnoxious, but it's for those bacon begging strips. And the dog goes, bacon, 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 bacon. And you're watching through his eyes. These guys are saying, acorns, acorns, acorns. And they're going out like crazed, absolutely crazed birds looking for places to hide their acorns. Besides my shake roof, they have taken the vents that come up from like the bathrooms, those black PVC pipes. They filled them to the very top. I can't tell you my mixed feelings about this. This is a granary tree right here. And usually that group of acorn woodpeckers uses one tree. They eat the woodpeckers. You know, they said that in the old days we'd say they left the acorns there so that grubs and things would come and eat the acorns, and then they'd eat the worms and the grubs. They say, no, in Nesting Birds of Monterey County, which is breeding birds, it's a terrific book. They said, no, we're we don't believe that anymore. They eat the acorns all year long. They move them, Chuck told me, from place to place, hole to hole, but they continue this through the whole year. They live on the function of the oak trees and the acorn crop. And if the acorn crop really dips, the population of these birds really dips too, because they need.
That's a pine tree over in Pacific Grove, and it's cut off at the top, and the entire circumference is covered with all these holes. And there are also some nesting cavities that the birds were coming out of. These are cottonwood dotted castings, and there's a nesting cavity right there that they were using, trying to keep the starlings out.
Do they reuse the holes?
Yeah.
More than once?
Yeah. And like I say, trying to keep the starlings out, because they'll come in and take over.
Yep.
So we're going to move on to night heron. So black-crowned night herons used to have a wonderful colony of about 18 to 20 pairs over at Carmel Point. And this is prior to the 50s. But then Carmel Point, also known as the Golden Rectangle, was becoming more and more popular and more expensive, and bigger homes were going in. And the black-crowned night heron started leaving. And then it was probably, 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, we started seeing them arriving at the Bird Island area. And from the Pelican Point, there's the saddle that's right there in front, and then an island between the saddle and the main island, and then the other islands over here. And at one point, we had 8 nesting pairs over there. And these were the only colonies around the Monterey Peninsula where nesting was taking place. And yeah. Well, unless Jerry took you out in the boat to see them, it was hard to discover. But on the big main island, there's a cave over on the northwest side. There was a nesting pair in there. The little island in between the mainland and Pelican Point, and the big island, there's a rock right there. It had 2 nesting pair in there. And then on the island itself, there may have been several on the backside that we couldn't see. And then in 2011, we had the one that was most obvious right there in front, and had the 3 chicks that looked like little dinosaurs. And photographers would be lined up there with their long lenses for days and days on end, trying to photograph them. So watching them and seeing what they were doing was just the most fascinating thing. You could be out there forever and ever and ever. And I was out there, both on duty and off duty, trying to capture as many images and as many little funny places as they were. So you see 3 eggs right there with a brand new chick coming out. And in here you can see that one with big wide open mouth, and the other 2 are hiding under her, and she's getting pretty frustrated by it. And then on a windy day, she gathers them up in her wings to keep them nice and warm, and then they fight with themselves over food. That was probably the best year. So from the little tiny dinosaurs, they're developing into these juveniles, which are kind of unique in their own with all those earth tones. And then you see a 1-year bird and a 2-year bird. It's finally starting to get its great plumage, and then capturing a bird in flight is the most wonderful thing. Now, I did go on eBirder, and I was looking at the frequency of night herons around the San Francisco Bay. You know, and we were lucky to have 10 or 12. But in some of the locations down around San Jose to Palo Alto and then back over this way, 40 to 50 birds seen in one tiny area. And when you look at the teardrop markings on the map showing where they are, all around Drake's Bay and all the way down to the San Francisco Bay and Alameda and the west side, it's just amazing how many more are up there. And the big move right now is to protect their nesting spots and keeping any kind of development at least 200 yards away and keeping loud noises and things out. It's apartments way over there. And then reestablishing habitats for them. When we look at our habitats along here, we see them feeding at Weston Beach. We see them feeding over at Odello. The greenback heron's been feeding out at the golf course, or you might go to Aguajito and sometimes see them now. Loss of habitat is going to be the biggest problem in keeping good numbers around our area. Even with all the big development up in the Bay Area, there's still enough wetland areas up there that there's really, really good numbers. Okay, moving on to the next one.
This is a bird you're not likely to see in your career as a Point Lobos docent. It was only one time when I saw it. I'd never seen one before, and I really don't have great hopes to see one again, except we've got a bunch of investigators here in this room who could go out and looking in the right places might be able to make it happen, find it again. Now, this is an interesting story because, as Cheryl mentioned earlier, there are some tricks to interpretation, and one of the tricks that some interpreters do on trail walks is they stop every once in a while and they look around and they ask everybody in the group to look around and see what they see. And this happened about 3 or 4 years ago. to the trainee class. So there was a group of trainees out there, and some of you are still in the room. And he stopped, this was being led by Jim Covell of the aquarium, and he stopped this particular place on the Carmela Meadow Trail. And somebody said, well, what's that? Now, isn't that a face that would just melt your heart right there? That's the cutest little, good idea, little tiny owl, just a little tiny owl. And it was seen in this tree, which unfortunately that same winter, that tree fell over. But they were seeing that sighting was posted on the bird box, the local bird hotline, and it became a sensation. I was out there once. There was a fellow with a camera about that long, camera lens about that long, taking lots and lots of pictures. He actually made a video too, which I was hoping we could show you, but we got very poor Wi-Fi here. If you want to see the video, if you go to that page that was shown earlier, it's my website, birdinglight.com, go to fun stuff, and then click on that picture of the northern saw-whet owl. It's about a 2-minute video. Make sure you wait until about halfway through. At least it's about 2 minutes. And so about a minute through, something exciting happens. Surprising. So it's kind of an object message, and really using our eyes and ears. You know, it's this thing that Cheryl showed is really appropriate when you're out on the trail looking for birds, because you can sometimes hear something that you can't see. Hopefully you won't see one, you won't have any trouble seeing one this size. But these pictures after this one, I think, well maybe these are all Chuck's pictures, but
They are.
they are, okay. I never saw the birds out of the nest, but Chuck was there more than I was. He lived pretty close by. And took some great pictures. Cute little owl. So I think, do you have one bird you want to talk about?
You know what fascinated me was when Point Lobos came into control of the state parks in 1933. It was partly a gift and partly they paid AML for the land, but it was a gift, which you know very well. And they did a census of the flora and fauna from 1934 to 1935. And I was looking through that census, and I was amazed to find greater roadrunners. You can imagine. Greater roadrunners now are, we still have some in our county. They're in the Fort Ord areas. They need open, dry, arid places where there are lizards and snakes that they can feed off of. But roadrunners were at Point Lobos. Another thing that was at Point Lobos was the western bluebird. And there are not western bluebirds. I think probably 10, 15 years ago there was a pair sighted.
They're across the street at Lobos Ranch, around the
Yes, and also back in Hastings Reservation again in Carmel Valley, they had all these studies on the western bluebird. And what I learned from listening to them was the western bluebird survives the winters out there by eating one particular thing that I thought there was no good on earth could come from it, and that is mistletoe. And they eat mistletoe all through the winter, and the seeds pass through them and come down and get glued on the branches down below. And then where those seeds are, you know, mistletoe is, they become a host for this parasitic mistletoe. And more mistletoe grows. And more dead snags and things that they love to use as lookouts and as nest areas. It just keeps going. So those two I wanted to share with you. They were so surprising to me. Acorn woodpeckers were not on the list. And they are now. There are acorn woodpeckers at Point Lobos. So these differences in the years in that period of time, fascinated me. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
You have to repeat your stuff on the bluebirds, because now he's showing the bluebird pictures.
Okay.
I'm a yellow bird.
They do well in nesting boxes, and they've had very good luck with nesting boxes at Hastings, but they cannot compete with the European starling. And so that is one of the issues for that bird, losing territory to the European starlings again, which are extremely aggressive. That's all I have to say.
All right, I'd like to just thank
We're not done.
what's that?
We're not done.
Go on.
There is a church that's going to be held tomorrow. You could probably just move this and pick it up where you left off. But, I don't know. But
You know, Judd, there is one thing about resources from the group that Stan has put together, and maybe he could just say a word about that for the birds.
And one more poem.
Okay.
There is a page newly installed on the website. The three of us got together and decided what would be good resources for people who want to learn more about birds. So it's on the
I'll hold
website
it up.
under docent
YouTube.
interpretation or something like that. Interpretation references. So go to the website, interpretation references, and you should see something about bird references.
Last poem. This has always been one of my absolute favorites. Josie doesn't like the turkey vulture hanging over her desk, so she keeps moving it. Well, that's not the best example. But anyway, this is Robinson Jeffers. I'd walked since dawn and laid down to rest on a bare hillside above the ocean. I saw through half-shut eyelids a vulture wheeling high up in heaven, and presently it passed again, but lower and nearer, its orbit narrowing. I understood then that I was under inspection. I lay death still and heard the flight feathers above me. They whistled and made their circle and came nearer. I could see the naked red head between the great wings. They were bearing down, staring. I said, "My dear bird, we're wasting time here. These old bones will still work. They're not for you." But how beautifully he looked, gliding down on those great sails. How beautiful he looked, veering away in the sea light over the precipice. I tell you solemnly that I was sorry to have disappointed him. To be eaten by that beak and become part of him, to share those wings and those eyes, what a sublime end of one's body. What an enskyment. What a life after death.